Just talking about cover crops, this is kind of a hot topic. There's a lot of research that they're doing for big ag, but bring in and why we want to bring our home garden. So, what are some things that reasons, or what is it? It's a crop that we're growing to benefit the soil rather than to harvest something. So also maybe sometimes called a green manure, a living mulch. So this cover crop, we're hoping it can help prevent soil compaction because it's covering the soil, protecting it from raindrops, from wind, prevent erosion. We're really trying to feed the microbes. This idea that the soil has all these living organisms and they will help our plants grow. So if we can keep them alive and well and feed them and nourish them, when we go to put the crop that we do want to produce food, hopefully at that point, it will have those microbes ready to work for us. So that's a key thing about why we might do a cover crop. Just thought too that cover crops, you may not see an instant help with your production immediately. You see better results at about 2 years or more after adding that in with your regular crop. So it's not a instant, just like I put down some fertilizer and, oh, I can see it right away in my plants. It's something that's feeding the soil, so it is going to take time. So when we talk about soil health, we talk about a number of principles, and I'm just going to address the ones that that cover crops really help us with. And one of them is keeping that soil covered. Here on this left, I got a nice cover crop of buckwheat, and I believe it's black oats. But we've got a cover, so that nice height on that and leaf cover is actually helping to suppress weeds because it's shading it out, hopefully out competing some of them. We have less surface crusting, so droplets of rain are not beating that down. We're hoping that we're holding onto our soil if we're in an area that's really windy and could sweep it all away, or also keeping water if we're on a slight slope from carrying that soil away. A cover crop can actually help bring water into the soil so it holds it instead of running off, as well as holding snow through the winter can be part of the advantage. The other thing it's going to do is moderate temperatures. So that soil in the heat of the summer, if it's got a cover crop on it, is going to be a little bit cooler. So maybe more conducive for the microbes as well. And keeping your whole area a little bit cooler. With that, it's good to keep in mind if you have a cover crop in the very early spring or that's overwintered and is still growing, it may slow down your soil warming up. So you may need to be real conscious about that if you're thinking about planting warm crops into it, like tomatoes or peppers, that you might need to get any residue off, pulled back just a bit to help warm up your soil. We are looking to increase diversity in the soil. And really, honestly, the cover crop is kind of an experiment. This was my first experiment, a picture of it. I had some success, and this is actually pretty good coverage in that first little section. And it's after it's had that first couple early frosts. And so it's begun to winter kill. And that's a good thing too. I really like a cover crop that will winter kill. That residue will break down over the winter. It's still covering that soil. But then in the spring, it's probably broken down enough and it's easy to plant into early. And as you can see, one of the things I learned through that first cover crop is that you really need to have good seed to soil contact in order to get it started. And we'll talk about what you need to do to get it started and when you want to get that started. We're creating some residue, hopefully, for beneficials. We can also have some pests that might be more likely to overwinter, but we're really encouraging beneficial insects to move into our garden. we're hoping to increase that mycorrhiza, which 90% of our plants create a symbiotic relationship with mycorrhiza. So those roots going down in the soil only cover about 0.05% of that soil area, but that mycorrhiza has these little thin filaments moving out into the soil, and they can have a lot more surface area to move those nutrients that are in the soil to the plant. And in return, the plant shares a little bit of sugars with it, so that it's beneficial for both. Cover crops also can be used to reduce disease and nematodes if that's a problem in your garden. So with cover crops, it's not, oh, you should do this cover crop. It's thinking about, what do you want a cover crop to do for you in your garden? So, and then again, if living roots to feed the soil, that's just a really big soil health idea that we want to lay hold of. We're developing or maintaining the bacteria, the fungi, the earthworms, and other forms of life that are there in that soil. Those roots in the soil are helping to improve those soil aggregates. Those roots are exuding chemicals that are holding those soil together. So if you've got sandy soil, it's holding it together so that water's not just flowing through it. And if you've got clay soil, it's actually creating little lumps so that there's room for water and air to flow between them. We can use cover crops if we have really compacted soil. There's a few of them we'll just mention as I go through that can help actually loosen up those heavy soils and reducing that compaction. Retain and recycle plant nutrients. Some of our cover crops can actually grab onto nitrogen instead of during the winter it washing away, or through the summer if there's rain or extra water, and keeping it from washing away, but holding it right there in place. And then as it breaks down, it's going to release it back into the soil so the next can use it. And then again, we always want to try to have that 5 to 8% organic matter. 5 is ideal. Most of our soils here in Idaho have about 1 to 2% when we get them. And so it's just helping us to get that organic matter in there. And if we've been doing it for a while, allowing it to get up to 8% when we have those microbes in place, probably not the first year that you're doing it. So what are the types of cover crops? Well, there's annuals. So there are perennial ones. Generally, I probably don't recommend them for you, the home gardener, unless you have some way to terminate them, incorporate them in the soil, or if you're grazing animals through it. And I'm not going to address that a lot. I'm going to look more at annuals because they're probably easier for us to control in our home gardens. Also thinking about, just like our plants in the garden, we have some that do really well in the cool season. So they're great for that early spring or going in that late summer into fall to give coverage. And then there's some that do great with warm weather, and we would use them in the mid-season. So if we're taking out an early crop, maybe we put in a warm cover crop and then go into a fall crop after that. So the other thing to think about with your cover crops is there is a cost for that seed. So as part of our, what am I trying to do here? What do I want it to do? I also want to consider, how much is this going to cost me to include that in? And I would suggest that it's often well worth it. There'll be benefits to your garden, benefits to your soil, planting a cover crop. So the kind of grouping of cover crops I'm going to talk about too there's grasses, and they tend to add bulk, and then they'll pull up nitrogen. So if you for some reason ended up with a garden, you dumped a bunch of manure on it and realized it was really hot, this could be a really good cover crop. And if you're using it because it was too hot, you might actually cut that cover crop and go put the residue in the compost pile to break down, because you're trying to pull that nitrogen out. Or if you just have a little extra you want to save over the winter, that can be a strategy. The legumes are actually the nitrogen fixers. So if you've had a real heavy garden crop, heavy feeding one, maybe you want to put a legume one in there to feed the soil, to put that nitrogen in there so it's available for the next crop. Brassicas, there are some large roots, deep roots, so they're kind of scavengers. They're going to be pulling nutrients up from down deep and making it more available near the surface for our garden plants. And then there's other broadleaves. We'll talk about a few of them. They add organic matter. Some of them can attract pollinators, may help with weed control. Also, adding variety to our plant families. One thing we want to think about with cover crops is how is it going to fit with our crop rotation? It's great because there are some that we don't maybe grow very much in our actual garden. So it can help break up pest and disease cycles just because it's one more family could kind of disrupt that, to disrupt the pests, confuse them, keep them from finding the crop that you do want to grow. So let's talk about grass cover crops. Some examples that we might use in a home garden: rye, annual rye, wheat, barley, oats, millet, Sudan grass. And a really powerhouse plant, one that I really like, is black oats. And one of the reasons I really like it is when I put it in late August, early September, and I get a good head on it, so it's, a good foot, 18, 24 inches tall, it's going to winter kill. And I know I'm in the Treasure Valley, so I'm a little bit warmer here, but so surely if you're in eastern or eastern Idaho, it will winter kill. So it's going to grow. It's going to keep growing through those first few light frosts. And then once you get that heavy one, it just knocks it out. And then as it goes through the winter, it lays down and then it tends to break down. It'll leave that residue. So it's helping to kind of suppress weeds just from the cover. But it's also broken down enough that you just kind of pull it back a little bit and plant right into it, pull that back in place as mulch when you're planting in the spring. So let's talk about what are some good things about grass cover crops. Reducing erosion, those really bulky roots, may provide some weed control, especially like that rye. It's got some allelopathic effects, and so if you have that planted in the fall, it's going to be several weeks into the spring before that wears off. And so maybe it'll keep some of those weeds that you're wanting to keep from sprouting just from the chemicals from that plant. Prevents nutrient loss, produces large amounts of organic matter. It can be slower to break down, especially, I know for me, annual rye, if it's going to overwinter, it's going to pop up and I'm going to have to do something to terminate it. I'm going to cut it and put a tarp on it, just to get it to break down enough that I can use those beds to plant into. So again, if it doesn't winter kill, or if you've planted it early in the summer, making sure you have a way to terminate it. And I'm going to talk a little bit about termination a little bit later. But otherwise, it can get those seed heads on it, and then it becomes a weed for you in your garden. So that is part of the planning of using a cover crop, is how to terminate it. They are slower to break down. It may hold that nitrogen before it breaks down. So maybe your soil there is a little bit nitrogen poor initially as it slowly breaks down until it's done. And then those bulky roots may take a while to break down. So legume cover crops can be great. They are, again, great for feeding the soil. Some examples would be peas, beans, clover, sun hemp. I'm curious about this one. I've heard good things about it, but I hear it gets really tall. Because it's a tropical plant, it doesn't tend to ever get far enough to go to seed, no matter when you plant it in the summer. But once it begins to flower, those stalks get really thick, hence the hemp. but maybe starting it later in the summer and then letting it winter kill and having time to break down. So I've got a mix that has that in it, going to experiment with it and play with it. Another powerhouse one to feed the soil is Austrian peas. Benefits, fixing that nitrogen, putting that nitrogen in. It is good to know with these crops that if you want the most nitrogen for your buck, you need to terminate the legumes before they begin to flower. Once they begin flowering, you're still going to get nitrogen from them, but not as much. And if you let them go all the way, you'll still get some nitrogen. But again, if you want the most nitrogen, you're going to terminate them before they go to flower. They can help prevent erosion. They're going to add organic matter to the soil, but they do break down quickly. So they're not going to have that good cover all winter long if you're going into the fall with them. And then if they do go to flower, they are great for pollinators. They will help attract those to our garden and feed them. So what are some problems we might have with this? It's not going to remove any excess nitrogen. So if that's your problem, that's not your best cover crop. They are going to break down quickly. So if you're trying to have coverage for the whole winter, you might put it into a mix with something that doesn't break down as quickly and have some synergy there. And it may not provide good weed control. It may not have enough cover. It may not be fast enough growing to outcompete the weeds. So it's something to consider. What weeds do you have growing in your garden? So another group, and these really are broadleafs as well, but the brassicas, again, we have to be careful because we tend to grow some brassicas as part of our crop themselves. So thinking about how am I going to work that in so I don't have too much brassica creating a disease situation. But like the radishes, turnip, I did have someone share they did try turnips one time, but they must not have had enough time for them to break down. So that would be one that's kind of big and bulky. And if there's not enough time to break it down, it might be really hard to plant into it. And same with the nitro radish or the forage radish. If you plant that in the late summer, early fall, you're gonna get a pretty good growth on it, but that'll winter kill, and that one will break down before you go in with spring crops. So what are some benefits of brassicas? Nutrient scavengers. So they're going to be roots going deep in the soil, bringing nutrients up. So it's more in the top layer of soil. Radishes can open up that compacted soil, so creating a big space. It may actually, that space and those roots going down can actually create an empty space for other roots to follow down deeper later on if you're not tilling the soil after the crop, if you're no tilling into it. Weed suppression during growing and for some time after termination. This is something that we see with brassicas. The other one is natural pest management. If you are having a problem with nematodes, you can use it as a biofumicant. So yellow mustard is the one that you want to do if you're having an issue with nematodes. The thing to know, when you cut that one, you do need to incorporate that into the soil very quickly, immediately after cutting, in order for those chemicals to do work against those nematodes. Otherwise, they break down too quickly and it's not having that effect. It'll give you all the other benefits. So something to think about is you need time for large roots to break down before you can till in it. And then that residue could prevent seeds from germinating. Generally, we don't have a problem if there's some kind of allelopathic effect from one of the cover crops. We generally don't have a problem planting a plant into it, but possibly starting seeds in it could be a problem. And then let's talk a little bit about some of the broadleaf cover crops. These are some fun. I've played with the buckwheat one, really like that one. In fact, it grows very quickly, so it tends to outcompete, get a good canopy. It's a warm season, so it sprouts really quickly. At about 6 weeks, it needs to be terminated, or else those beautiful blooms. So you want it to bloom a little bit so that when you cut it, it'll stop growing. But if you let it bloom too long, then you will have buckwheat seeds for your next, mixed in with your next crop as one of your weeds. Another strategy is if you are getting a bed ready is you put that first crop in the early summer and you go ahead and let it go to seed, cut it, and let those seeds sprout. So for a second crop of buckwheat, and then terminate that one early enough so you don't have any seeds from it, and then go into the winter with double, having 2 crops of buckwheat. Flax have not played a lot with this one, but again, watch it going to seed. Sunflower, if you're using that one, maybe if you're starting it late in the summer and you're just getting a little bit of growth on it, of course, if you let it go all the way to the 7 or 8 feet that a sunflower can go, those stalks may be awfully thick to try to cut and get broken down to use that bed soon. Phacelia is another great one. It's got a really broad, it's a cool season, likes to start early, sprouts up, broad root system, really thick root system, dies early. Again, terminating it early enough that you don't have a seed residue to be popping up. And then this last one is technically can be one of our crops, but I really like getting some sweet potato into my bed simply because it provides really good coverage. And so it's out competing weeds in some areas of my garden, as well as it's in the morning glory family. So it just kind of breaks up some of the families of my other crops. And we have enough heat in this area. I usually get a decent crop. If you have a shorter growing season, you might not get much of a crop out of it, but it can be a strategy to help break up that cycle. So here's a beautiful picture of some buckwheat. I think this was my buckwheat crop that I terminated a couple weeks ago. Was just in bloom, so I wanted to get a good cut on it and terminate it so that it will have time to break down and I can plant in that next spring. And this is actually a buckwheat crop that was cut early so that they'd get that second growth on it. The first section went to the compost pile, and then this one will get terminated in place. So, and that's my sweet potato cover crop, or cover crop, but it's got that nice coverage over the ground. So what about a mix? A mix can be really helpful. Just because they're different plants growing together kind of confuses our pests, breaks up monoculture for disease purposes. Things to think about if you're doing it, that grass, legume, brassica, that kind of complement each other, can provide benefits in that way. The one thing to think about is you want your mix to be similar, either warm season or cool season, so that that's getting that germination together and not late or one popping up later. So this is one I put in 2 weeks ago, I think. So not quite as thick as coverage. So again, when you're planting a cover crop, and if you're doing the scatter method, you're scattering the seed over your bed. I go back through, I tamp it down with the back of my shovel to kind of press that into the soil a little bit, go back over with a little bit of compost. Sometimes I rake it just a little bit. So I'm still experimenting to see what's the best way to get that seeded, since I don't have a drill that's going to drill that in, or seeder. It's just all done by hand. The other thing to think about when you're starting any cover crop is you're going to have some moisture on it for the first few days to get it until it's sprouted up. So I have drip line running through there. That is not enough to start that cover crop. I need to water it down, either sprinklers or I use just sprinkling off the hose, get it good and soaked. And then I will be watering once or twice a day for the first 3 or 4 days, and then maybe once a day for the next couple. And then once I've got good sproutage, if we've been really dry and hot, maybe once a week, addition to what's the regular drip irrigation. So this is another one. I know this one has some annual rye in the mix. The previous one I showed you, I was so excited. It's a sample, so I'm be excited to see how. But when I read through that list of seeds, I saw that everyone would winter kill in my area. So I know that I'm not going to have to worry about terminating it next spring. I am late enough. It will not have time to seed. This one, the annual rye, I will have to go back in and cut. And I will put a tarp on it for a few weeks just to help it to break down and smother it. And then I should be able to plant into it. So again, crop rotation, something to think about. Maybe in one year you do brassica crop, brassica cover crop, brassica crop, and then your 3 years where there's no brassica in that bed. Maybe that works for you for rotation. Or maybe a cover crop, one type of crop, warm cover or spring, put that warm buckwheat. I tend to follow garlic with buckwheat because it's just perfect timing. I'm pulling that out. It's the right time of year to start a buckwheat crop, create some lovely bed to grow something else into next spring. The other thing to think about, if you are using a mix, if there's enough variety and you have not had any disease in any of those areas, it may be okay. You may not have a problem with it. That diversity may be confusing enough for our insect population and for our disease population. It may not contribute to it. If you've had diseases in any of those particular families, then you might want to pull them out and make sure you're not using that as part of your mix. So again, adding more variety. So buckwheat, that buckwheat family, we don't grow. The only thing I can think of that we grow for food is our rhubarb, and that's a perennial stay in one place, so it can be a way to diversify. What time of year? So think about cool season, plant early spring or fall. That fall really is, we're talking about the last couple weeks of August, first couple weeks of September. It needs to have enough time, enough light, so it to get tall enough to get the most out of that seed before it terminates. And maybe squeeze in, you can plant sometimes, think about starting some on the edge of a crop that you aren't going to be able to terminate till the end of the growing season. See if you can fit that in and add it. Might use a cool season cover crop, preparing a new bed for planting early spring before you plant those warm cover crops out. As early season plants finish, maybe you pop one in to kind of carry you over. So let's just talk, it's really important. Planning is going to be really important with succession. Didn't mean to talk too much about that because I'm going to run out of time. But plan ahead. This is going to be your most important. Think about, what is your goal? Do you need nitrogen? Are you trying to add bulk into your soil? Are there some things that need to be suppressed? Do I really want something that will drill down and break at my compacted soil? It will help guide me about what I might be wanting out of that cover crop. Know when that cover crop needs to be planted. Again, you don't want to, I watched somebody throw a whole bunch of cover crop seed out in the middle of October, and I'm thinking, yeah, maybe it'll sprout, but it's not going to grow. It doesn't have enough sunlight, and that frost is coming. So think about making sure that there's enough time for it to grow, or enough time to be there when you need to terminate it. So if you know you're going on vacation in 6 weeks, don't put in a buckwheat crop because you won't be there to terminate it. So being aware of that time, how long is this going to need to grow? 6 weeks, 8 weeks. You want to prevent seeds. and allow time to break down before planting into it. Okay, do you want to suppress weeds? Add nitrogen, organic matter. So let's talk a little bit about terminating. This is really important. I love the cover crops that will winter kill that I can put in late enough. I can watch them grow beautifully. I do nothing and I come back in the spring and just brush those back because they've had time to break down and they're dead. Mowing can be a strategy. A lot of them will require more than one mowing, or you can mow and smother. Panda tarps or a silage tarp is putting that over for 2 to 4 weeks, depending on timing. And with that laying on there a little bit of weight, it will really push that cover crop straight to the ground. Contact all the microbes, all the beetles that like to help us break things down. They will just eat through that. You pull it up and you've got a nice smooth bed that just needs a little bit of prep to plant into. Tilling can also, tilling can do it if you have if it's cut enough, you might be able to till into it. You might have to do some digging, just thinking about what that cover crop requires. So again, that cover crop, if you lay it down, contact with the soil will help it break down faster. Chopping it up. So maybe you cut it and then run a lawnmower over it to kind of break it up so it'll break down quickly. Keeping that soil moist when it's on there will help it break down quicker. Putting some compost or mulch over it in the late fall after it's terminated, they just help break it down, and then again, tarping it. So some tools I like for terminating a cover or just working with cover crops. Sometimes if it just needs a little lifting, a little bit of help to break it down, that can be helpful. I do have a scythe. It just cutting down a few rows. My favorite is actually the hand shears, and just cutting through gives me a clean cut, and hand pruners. Just a few quick tips. Good seed to soil contact for starting that cover crop. Be sure you're planting timing. And where do you find that information? So I believe there should have been a handout sent to you that has a list of resources. Green Covers, I love that particular business. They have details about how long to germination, how easy is it to terminate it. And that can be really helpful if you want to experiment with different ones. Cover crops, you can also find them at some of our gardening stores now. So be on the lookout. And I know some of the larger mail order seeds online you can find cover crops through a lot of those. As you might relay, intercropping may work for cover cropping. Do be conscious of plant families, especially if you've had any disease pressure from any of those families. So, and just as we are not big ag, I don't see why it wouldn't be impossible if you have a packet of seeds that you can terminate without it going to seed. It gives good seed suppression, maybe plants with deep tap roots. I've often wondered, I have that extra pack of California poppies. Could I just throw that in? I'd have a deep tap root. Those are pretty easy to just go through and pull or hoe if they're not too big before they've started to go to seed. And maybe that's a way of breaking up and adding another family. So these are questions. I don't have research on those particular ones, but there is a lot of research out there on the other cover crops that are being used by big ag. So, and last of all, plants that will be easy for you to terminate. So great resources. SAR has a great publication online. I believe there's a link to it in that handout I gave you. Green Covers, great information on their site. There are EDU sites. I'm starting to see a little bit more on cover crops. I think Eastern Washington, they had one for Eastern Washington that will really fit a lot of our area. And then seed companies even have some good information on different cover crops, and maybe even some charts. I think the handout I gave you has one for, I am drawing a blank on the name, but you can go to that one with charts and kind of compare, is this good for me? Is this not working for me? Any questions?
Thanks, Ruth. That was really great. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask her. If not, it looks like we've got Ron and Jared with us here. So we can move on to plant talk. You guys can ask any questions.
You won't have me on for very long. I've got to step out of here in just a minute, but very good coverage of the topic, Ruth. I really appreciate that. Cover crops, we used to call them green manure crops, but the cover crops are a little bit more than what it was 50 years ago when we talked about green manure crops. So very good. I think this is cover crops topic is one that we can incorporate a lot more into our home gardens than we have been. And I know she talked about, well, if it's not started very long, you're not going to get very much out of it. But as long as you have a living root, you're getting something out of it. So you may have terminated or planted a little bit late, but if you can get something up and growing and have a living root for at least a little while, you are feeding that soil biology. So again, great coverage on the topic, Ruth. I'm going to sign out now and leave it up to Jared. He's not driving, he's traveling.
No, but I'm traveling on the road, so but
We did
seems
have
like we have
one
good
question for Ruth. So somebody wanted to know, what are the sweet potatoes that you planted?
So well, there's different ways. One, you can just order sweet potato slips. I know that this year I bought, or actually last 2 years, I bought them at a nursery in May, and just soaked them a couple days, put them in. You can actually start slips for sweet potato from a sweet potato that you purchase at the grocery store. Again, always looking for one that doesn't have any disease on it or doesn't appear to. But you're gonna, I want to say you soak them so that they start to sprout, and you take those sprouts after they've started, soak them in water for a few weeks, so that they get a root system on it. And so that's a sweet potato slip. You can find really good information at several EDU sites on how to start those slips or how to plant sweet potatoes if you're interested. I know in my season, it's just long enough to get some decent sized potatoes. If you've got that short growing season, it may just be the covers. And they're a green, you can actually eat the greens as well. I just use them like spinach.
Cool. So another question that came up that's kind of along the lines of cover crops. I usually mulch about 12 inches deep. When could I do a cover crop?
So, I mean, if you've got some space in your garden, you can pick maybe a small area that you do a summer cover crop, and then you drop it, turpinate it, and then you mulch over it that 12 inches deep. Think about this is your mulch if you're doing one in the late fall. So starting at end of August, beginning of September is going to give your best growth or your most growth before it the winter comes along. And the other thing you could do is use one that winter kills, and as it lays over it in the, providing you don't have snow on the ground, in that late fall, early winter.
Okay. Those are the questions I see in the chat right now, but if you guys have other questions, feel free to put them in the chat and I can relay them to Ruth and Jared, or you can go ahead and unmute yourself and ask. And again, you're welcome to ask about anything in the gardening realm. You guys seen anything interesting lately, Jared?
Well, while we're on this topic, I actually did some in my garden this year. more of a, I guess, companion planting. So I did clover, a white clover, that's a low growing variety, with my peas, and had them planted about the same time. And so the clover's still in there after the pea plants have finished, and it's actually a perennial. So I'm testing out the live ground cover or living mulch. There's a couple different kind of terms people are throwing around with this idea. So that's something that I can mow to keep in check. And then if I need to, depending what I plant back, if it's something that I'm gonna seed, if it's not a big enough, so let's say I put something with a large seed in there again, like peas, if I do that again next year, if I mow that and plant, I'm gonna trial this and see if the pea can get up before the clover leaves out again, or if I need to cut strips of the clover out in order to seed things into it and then let it fill in through the year again. But just a little tidbit of something I'm trying out. And I did clover and peas because they both have to have a separate inoculant for them, but they're both fixing nitrogen, and I was impressed with the weed suppression with the clover this year. So
Somebody asked about what would be good cover crop to choke out field bindweed, and I don't have a great answer for that one. Do you have something?
Actually, I did have, I've got field bindweed in my garden plot. The pressure or the amount of it wasn't very great, but I did see some suppression with my clover and peas of the little bit of bindweed that I did have in there. But it also comes down to, how thick is the bindweed?
So we had someone ask also, she said, I use planter boxes. Would black oats work well for that? And then she added, and can I leave plants in the garden that are done for the season, squash, corn, pea leaves, etc.?
I'll take the one on planter boxes, just that the black oats would be great if you've finished up a crop, or if you're starting it just towards the end. Yeah, it's going to grow up, it's going to lay down, create that mulch on the top. I think it's a really great cover crop just because it does winter kill, and then it's got that nice mulch through the winter. What was that?
The other
material.
question, the other question about crop residue, that's another principle of soil health, leaving a crop residue to create what they call an armor over the soil so that you get less wind erosion and water erosion from the soil. It helps to break up rainfall. Of course, we don't have to worry about a lot of rainfall in southern Idaho, but yeah, that crop residue. However, if corn, I would chop up the corn a little, at least, a bit, so it'll break down a little bit faster. I wouldn't leave just the whole stalks. The other thing is, make sure if you're going to be relieving the residue, if you've got some diseased plants, don't leave them there. Or, make sure that you have a really good rotation program so that you're rotating out of that family, like Ruth talked about with the cover crops. The crop residue is it's there. Nature has it all the time. We don't take off the range. They don't take the grass off the range. It stays there and it covers the ground. And so yeah, it's not a bad thing to do. Just to be aware that it may break down a little bit more slowly than you think. And so now there's some issues to deal with, but it's not a bad thing. And it is one of the 5 principles of soil health. So
I would add that that can help with your beneficial insects too, to give them someplace to winter over.
Yeah, and the worms like to work on that stuff as well. That's good
Yeah.
feed for the worms to pull that, come up. And as long as it gets pressed down to the soil, again, like we talked, you got something to, if it's just standing up, you're not going to get a lot of that, but if you can get it pressed down, if you have the ability to put chickens on there or something to work it down, then that's not a bad option as well, to work livestock into that.
So I'll ask you my question because I've seriously considered cleaning off my garden and planting a cover crop in the fall because it feels like here we wait and we wait and we wait and we wait for the weather to be warm enough in the spring to start planting. And so I feel like I might as well have something growing. But how do I get a cover crop to come up faster than all the weeds?
Um, well,
So-
choosing the right cover crop for the temperature during the year that you're planting.
So one of the things you could do if you got a weed issue, if you don't do a lot of tillage, the weeds will eventually not disappear, but they will really decrease a lot. So tillage
Well,
is
don't forget I'm watering with canal water,
okay.
so
So you got that issue. So one of the things that you could do, and you've got a flame weeder, and so you could get the ground ready, wait for a couple of days, then plant your cover crop in there. And as the weeds come up before the cover crop does, use your flame weeder. It doesn't take, you don't have to burn them. You just have to just kind of wilt them, a quick flash over with the flame weeder. And that'll knock a lot of those early germinating weeds out of the way until your cover crop can get up in there. Just don't wait until the cover crop is up because you kill the cover crop out.
right. So it would be better to plant in the spring instead of like in October before the snow flies.
If you're looking for something to come up in the spring now, I would go ahead and get them planted in the fall. I mean, the main thing is to get a living root into the soil. So,
If you have a cover crop that will tolerate mowing, you could, if it tolerates mowing as it's recently established, that mowing could help you control some of those weeds and, not really do detriment to the cover crop, and then it rebounds faster than the weeds.
Okay.
Yeah, and with that, if you're thinking about mowing, I would probably tend toward a grass cover crop.
Okay, like a
Those will
Sudan
tolerate
grass,
mowing a
ryegrass.
little better, some of our broadleaves.
Okay. We did sample a few cover crops in our demonstration garden last year and had some kind of mixed results. But I can say I am not a fan of the mustard that we got because I've been fighting that this whole year, like that spread weed seed everywhere. So I didn't like that one, but the other ones were okay. We had some rough germination on a few of them, but
What were the ones that worked really well?
so I had a oat grass and ryegrass mix that did great. We had there was a peas, like a winter peas, but it was mixed with something as well. And I can't remember what it was mixed with, but the peas came up great and whatever it was mixed with didn't. And then we had Sudan grass, and that was one of the ones with a rough germination rate. And I don't know if that's a climate issue or just the seed we got or what, but the stuff that did came up did fine, but it was like a fourth of it that came up.
I've on that
Oh.
one, I've heard farmers talking about Sudan grass being hard to get to germinate in our climate.
Oh, okay. So it is a climate thing. And we
it's a
did some
warm
buckwheat.
season grass. It's a warm season grass, and so if your soil temperatures don't get up warm enough, you may have an issue with that.
That would be a good choice if you were planting your cover late in the year, like after your cool crops come off and you're planting something July or something, needed something to cover the ground. Those warm season ones would be good, better then than earlier in the year.
now we know. We'll do better next time, right?
Well, isn't that how we learn, is by experimenting?
Yep. Well, I just got some recommendations from a guy at Utah State that's done a lot of study, and he just said these are kind of all good things. And I just bought like a little bit of everything and put a swatch in of each, and we just saw what happened. So
Yeah. Those are useful trials still too, yeah.
And I think, back to what Ruth was saying, you want to have an objective for your cover crops. Now, mine almost always I have something about I want to harvest as much nitrogen as I can so I don't have to fertilize with synthetic nitrogen. So that's one of those things. But you can also use your radishes for scavenging and some of those grasses to kind of scavenge and hold that nitrogen and release it more slowly throughout the next growing season. So have a purpose. If you're trying to add organic matter, your grasses, especially your warm season grasses, are really good at adding organic matter that breaks down slowly. So think through what you're trying to accomplish. If you have a pest problem, work with the brassicas, your nematode problem in your soils or whatever. So there are things that you can do, but have a purpose for it, not just one purpose and always is to have a live root in the soil. Beyond that, you're looking at maybe some other things that you're trying to accomplish with the cover crop. So kind of follow those principles and look what your objectives might be.
I did use a planting of radishes at my house. I had one spot in my backyard where they had put in a patio and deck right before we bought the house. And so this was kind of the rubble pile next to that, everything they had dug out. So after I got all the rocks and construction stuff and chunks of cement out of there, the soil was really compacted. And so radishes was one of the things I put in there just to try and loosen that soil and regain some of that soil health. And it's taken me, the 3 years we've lived here working on this, but by the end of this year, I just finally finished a beautiful shade garden there. So I feel like it's been worth it.
So do we have other questions that have been coming into the offices?
The only question I've had this week, I sent to your voicemail because I couldn't answer it. It was a turf question. Yeah, you'll get it when you get back. I was trying to find the picture I sent you the other day. We'll see if I can get this to go to the computer fast enough. I can show those tomatoes I sent you.
So this is the time for diseases to start showing up. And of course, powdery mildew is prime this time of year. This is great temperature, great conditions for powdery mildew. So be on a lookout for that. I do a lot of old leaf removal from my cucumbers and summer squash, and that seems to help a lot. Keep the amount of inoculum from these older leaves. The powdery mildew does like to get going on the new leaves, but it's already established on the old leaves when they were new. And so if you can get that old leaves off before they get powdery looking, that helps reduce that. And it also helps to reduce the humidity around those leaves.
Yeah, we saw 2-spotted spider mite on ornamental, but it was a dahlia today. So definitely seen some of that.
Yeah, it's starting to get loud. Actually, around our neighborhood, it's getting a little bit coldish for the spider mites.
Okay.
They like it hot and dry, and so we're kind of almost past the spider mite season. I didn't see a lot. I mean, I did get it on my beans, especially in the high tunnel. They were pretty bad on the beans, but they weren't too bad outside. It was pretty cool. And then we had some occasional rains, and spider mites don't like the rain, and so
Right.
we haven't had bad spider mite issues, at least in eastern Idaho, but I can imagine southern and
yeah, I
western
think we're
Idaho.
running about 10 degrees hotter in the days than you guys.
Yeah.
I had that rash of them in my hollyhocks. If you care about the hollyhocks.
Yeah, I've seen a fair amount of, oh yeah, well, I did tell you, we have the ability to quick test that, Lena, right?
Yeah, I've been
Jer-
waiting for you to tell me when I should take it to her.
Oh, I haven't checked my email today. Jared, what do you think that is?
Um,
If it helps, those white splotches were very squishy while the red was still firm and not quite ripe.
I can't think of the name right now, but I had somebody else bring me in something similar to that this year.
We thought perhaps, and I think we'll have to have Kasia test it, but it looked a lot like tomato spotted wilt virus, but it could be some insect disease, except usually, well, I think it's tomato spotted wilt virus, but we'll have it tested on that to see for sure.
I sent the other picture too of the leaves that go with this, but it hasn't arrived to my computer yet
Oh,
with the bronzing. So
yeah. Oh, I was going to say another thing I have seen quite a bit of last 2 or 3 weeks has been leaf hopper damage. I should take some pictures of some of these things. I see, oh yeah, well, there's got some leaf hoppers there. What leaf hopper damage looks like is you see the damage on the top of the leaf, but the leaf hoppers are actually feeding on the bottom. And it looks like mostly close to the veins, you've got almost white spots, like stippling type spots that you'll see on the top of the leaf. And that's almost always leaf hopper damage. Yeah, and I looked at that, Lena, and I'm not sure uh, if that's just an environmental. It doesn't look like spider mite damage. This is tomatoes, right?
yeah, this is the plant next to the one with those crazy tomatoes. And when we were looking in the compendium, it said that they can get bronzing of the leaves. But I was thinking
Oh,
that it
okay.
said new leaves got the bronzing for that disease, and these ones aren't new leaves. They're not the oldest either, but I don't know. Anyway, there's a
Yeah.
lot that can
Well,
go
that's
wrong with
possible.
tomatoes.
We'll get it tested. All right, I've got to leave. Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Thanks, Ron. What was that next question there? It went
So
by
he's
too fast
sorry,
for
I
me.
was waiting for my daughter to finish blowing her nose on the background. She didn't want to leave. So Greg said, I have a good production from a triple crown blackberry, but some branches have died back to the main branch. What do I do?
Oh, well, let's investigate what that dieback was. Um, I I've seen some stem borers, twig borers problems this year on bramble fruit. So, I mean, something like that, you'd want to look at the stem inside and see, trying to get a feel for what your dieback is. Is it insects or disease? Helps you figure out where to go next.
Yeah, so
So
Greg, if
no
you want to
insect
send me some
damage.
pictures, I could get those passed on for sure. As far as your production goes, you just gotta wait.
Yeah.
Wait and see. Although Ron and I both had winter dieback on our blackberries this year, all the way to the ground, because we had, it got really nice and
Rough
all the
winter.
snow melted and there was no insulation on them, and we hit -40. And both
Yeah.
of us have gotten blackberries off of them this year, which is not supposed to happen. So it can happen. Wait and see, hope. He said he's had good production for over a month. So that's great for this year. And like, correct me if I'm wrong, Jared, but you can get caneberries that get kind of spent and tired after they're done producing, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's also taking energy to produce that fruit. So the plant's energy and nutrition reserves can be down. They can be more susceptible to diseases and things like that.
Okay, well, we're a little bit after 8 o'clock now. So if there's not any other questions, I think we'll call it a night. But thank you all for joining us. Thanks again, Ruth, for that wonderful presentation. And thanks, Jared, for joining us on the road. And we will see you all in a few weeks.
All right.